Well, that's the main issue we're sinking our teeth into this morning. We've given you a background. There's been a lot of reaction to the travel restrictions imposed by the United Kingdom, especially, and Canada. And you have heard from the Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Mohammed, and you've also heard the reaction of the Secretary to the government of the Federation, and the federal government is still studying, even though oftentimes when the minister speaks, we believe he's speaking for the federal government. There have been a few other reactions which were not captured in that report. The Nigeria's ambassador to the UK, Sarafa Ishola, said that this is travel apartheid, while the president of the AFDB, that's Mr. Kinwumi Adesina, also issued a pretty strongly worded tweet saying that singling out African countries is very unfair, non-scientific and discriminatory. But the United Kingdom is still saying that what they're doing is in line, to study the situation while knowing more about the COVID-19 Omicron variant. Well, we have a few heavyweights to weigh into the issue this morning. We have with us this morning Professor Jidofo Adibe, who is a professor of political science and international relations, because this borders on diplomatic relations as well. We have Mr. Fasua, who is an economist, weighing in on the issue. And we also have a consultant public health physician, Dr. Mosiwe Maduka, who is joining us via Zoom. Gentlemen, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Prof, let me start with you. When Omicron, the variant, was by the South African authorities and South African scientists, that they had noticed this new variant, did you see this, restriction, this new restriction coming to Africa as a whole, and perhaps Nigeria in particular?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's been a bit of, in my own opinion, a bit of overreaction on the part of Nigerians and Africa. Let me correct one impression. It's not only the United Kingdom that has imposed restrictions on Nigeria. Cambodia has done that. Chile has done that. Several countries, it's not just the UK. And it is important that as much as we are emotional, about feeling isolated, will I use the word discriminated? Not exactly my opinion. We have to look at the broader context. The earlier variants, the beta variants and the Delta and the Beta variants, they claimed 5 million lives. And in the Western world, there were a lot of blames going around that the government responded quicker than they did, that the situation would have been stemmed. Remember, it was until it got to India, the Indian wave, that many countries rose up. So in the face of this variant coming from Southern Africa, Dr. Anthony Fauci, of the US CDC, said it will take about 2 weeks for scientists to even understand it, to know about its transmissibility, whether it is contagious or not. So what many governments did was to take proactive measures. UK imposed this restriction on 11 countries, including Nigeria. And the reason it mentioned Nigeria, in my own opinion, was because they said in Canada, the one that was discovered there was linked to Nigerians who traveled. Is it fair that only African countries? Perhaps not, because it's been detected in some other European countries and they were not affected. But is it enough for us to conclude that it is racist? I don't think so. In the earlier variants, Nigeria was on amber list, and several countries like Spain, Italy were on red list. And if you want to use the racist argument, why is it only Nigeria? Ghana and several other countries in West, were actually the only country in West Africa, were actually the only country from a non-Southern African country to be on that list. So it's not enough for us to conclude that it is a racist move. I think we should be very careful not to wear our blackness Africanness in a negative sense as a badge. In fact, in the Western world, they call it third worldism, whereby you periscope, you use as your filter all this your black identity, to do anything. I think it was wrong, in my own opinion, the choice of words by the Alhaji Lai Mohammed and our High Commissioner to the UK. Even if you felt it was a discrimination, as a High Commissioner or a diplomat, I would expect a different form of language. Remember, we say, who is a diplomat? A diplomat is somebody who can ask you, go to hell, and you'll be looking forward to when the journey will start. So you will have used a different form of language. It will not be impossible for him to seek for a meeting with higher officials to explain why should Nigeria be included in this list, instead of grandstanding, which is not unlikely to make them change their mind.
Well, I would like to get your... I do not know from what perspective you'll be acting. I'm looking at the economic, because we have, I beg your pardon, our international relations expert has pointed out the fact that this is not exactly targeted at just Nigeria. A few other African countries are on the list, and that, it's not just the UK that has done that. We have relations with a few other countries that have eventually done that. But we know that we have pretty strong relations with the United Kingdom. We have strong economic ties. We have strong, should we say, filial affiliations with the United Kingdom. A lot of our people are citizens over there. We have a very vibrant Nigerian community that goes back and forth between both, countries. So economically speaking, I mean, this COVID-19 has affected a lot of things. The other day, we're looking at the price of oil, and people were wondering what Omicron will do to the price of oil. So economically speaking, as an economist, first, how do you rate these travel restrictions, and how do you view the emergence of Omicron, the variant?
Well, thank you very much. I think that I kind of align with the accumulations of this world. I don't know which words Lai Mohammed has used and the other guys, but I pretty much align with them because I think the overreaction, okay, so if we have overreacted in Africa, especially in Nigeria, it must also be said that it's because of an overreaction by these other countries, not only the UK, up to Canada and so on. The mere detection of a new variant without actually even trying to find out. There's a certain woman called Dr. Angelique Coetzee in South Africa. She's the head of their own medical council. And she was the first person that actually discovered this with a patient. And I understand that South Africa has some of the best laboratories in the world, And all of that just gets swept aside because it's seen that Africa is a dispensable continent. See, we may have issues, right? And we know all our issues, but I don't think that we should put ourselves down for anybody. And if not for anything, for our children and the children yet unborn, perhaps they will do better than we. And so we must preserve our remaining dignity for those children that are coming behind us. If anyone thinks that Africa, what do we want from them? These guys, we don't have to listen to their scientists. If not many people have died in Nigeria, in Africa, as projected, nobody's even asking for that data to say, okay, look, maybe about 3,000 people have died of COVID in Nigeria, a bit less than that. Now, but why? Are you sure that data is correct? Okay, let us interrogate the data. Let us see, maybe it's not 3,000, maybe it's 10,000. Okay, why is it not in the millions as expected? So again, we're in another slavery era whereby, your opinions don't count and you have been mentally usurped, as it were. So now when we talk about the economic angle of it, economies are trying so hard to recover. We know for almost a year last year we were shut down, the entire world. Economies are trying to crawl out. Our economy is largely informal, but to a large extent we are also still connected. Like, for example, the UK, we have loads of people in the UK who are Nigerians. Nigerians are always going back and forth. That affects the economy of Nigeria. If we are struggling to get ourselves, in spite of all the problems we have, in spite of the fact that, yes, we complain about government not doing enough, we complain about corruption, people are just trying to survive. And then you have this kind of thing, shut down, somebody shut down, a kind of discrimination, actually. Like, people just begin to feel, oh, they just don't want us there. And I say again, it's because people believe that the African economy, it's relatively small and can be dispensed with so easily. Otherwise, between the UK and the US, these guys have millions of people who have died in these two countries. If you add them together, there are more than 1 million that have died in these two countries. Have they banned each other? Do they know what the variants are what? The existing variants, have we actually covered it? Are people not dying even in spite of, double vaccination, triple, quadruple vaccination? People are still dying. Maybe this is something we'll have to live with. Now, I have a theory that, on the economic front, okay, this is what I think is happening. There's a need for these countries to slow down the rise of the price of crude. If you remember that, like just on November 11th, the price of crude oil got to as high as $83–85. As we speak now, it's down to 70. It went down to about 65 a couple of days back. And I think that, this is a good opportunity which they latched onto. Oh, new variant has come. Okay. No, let's just take a decision that's going to slow down the world again. So everybody starts to, be very frightful and all of that. And of course, the price of crude, because the price of crude oil was driving inflation in those countries. And that's very critical. In the United States, for example, gas prices were going sky high. Inflation in every other goods was coming up. There was a supply chain crisis whereby they were thinking about how to even deliver Christmas things to their people. It was going to be a riot. People were, and then, of course, so the point is, would they allow crude oil prices to get to 140 where it was in 2006? Anything they can do to buy some time to see. And of course, that also begins to make people look at the argument on green energy and all of that, which is the next agenda, what they're driving now. Green energy, let's forget about investment in crude oil, in gas, and all of that. And I'll close so that you can speak that there's a certain article in a German newspaper that says the virus from Africa is with us. And they use the image of a poor woman with a child peeping out of a hut somewhere in Africa. And you say, the virus from Africa is with us. Come on. We need to speak up. If it's racism, let's call it racism what it is. And let's also begin to look inward to say, rather than going to all of these other countries, can we also retaliate and also stop them from coming here? We still have something of value, no matter how little it is. And we need to preserve that thing that's of value. And of course, let's think about what we can do for ourselves.
Well, Prof, has said that there seems to be an overreaction. I'm trying to see if we can get some medical intervention into this. I do not know if our guest who's joining us via Zoom is ready. But I believe that if the guest is ready, the guest will pop up very soon. But if not, okay, so we'll continue our conversation here.
Let me just say...
Prof, let me come back to you.
Okay.
Part of the criticism that has greeted this restriction is that it is non-scientific. It is not based on science. If they're saying, give us time to study this new variant, but we also heard not quite long after South Africa, raised the alarm over Omicron, we heard the Netherlands come forward to say they noticed this variant first. In fact, they had reported to the WHO first. Even the WHO has said the move which a lot of Western countries were about to take on Omicron in terms of restricting travel from the countries that have already reported Omicron was not going to help the science of it, because what they're trying to do is encourage countries to come out and report when they notice a mutation, a variant which they have noticed in their country. This certainly is not going to help that move. Don't you agree?
Thank you very much. First, I think we should put certain things in their boxes. The first is that nobody is denying the existence of institutional racism. It's there. And we have to isolate and know when to respond to what is racism, especially in its institutional manifestation. Now, the most drastic measure, if you hear, for example, given what has happened about the COVID-19, which there remain controversies about them, about the whole virus, even whether vaccination is effective or not. Given what has happened, if a country understands that a new variant has emerged, what do? You respond. Now, the question is, how has Nigeria responded? The most drastic response did not come from the UK. The most drastic came from Morocco, which banned all forms of in-flight to the country. You can't fly into Morocco, starting from Tuesday today. Then Angola closed this border with Southern Africa because it's where it was isolated. Rwanda has banned flights. So there must be a response mechanism in order to protect your population. Remember, they all said 2-week frame, because that was Dr. Anthony Fauci, still regarded as the authority on infectious disease. He said it will take about 2 weeks for scientists to understand whether it posed any danger. But so far that it seemed to be mild. So what do you do in such an instance? You do not fold your arms. You do not say, well, nothing will happen. What you have to take a measure. What is the response of Nigeria? That's what, instead of coming around and grandstanding and isolating, yes, there is institutional racism. We all know that. But instead of doing that, it would have been more useful, in my own opinion, to say, in respect of this new variant, we do not know whether it poses a danger, but this is government's response. Rwanda has done that, Egypt has done that, Angola has done that, Fiji, many countries have taken measures. What is Nigeria's measure? So if you are proactive to protect your population, and another is reactive, just responding to your response, it is a failure of leadership. What Nigerians are interested in, if this new variant turns out to be dangerous, what measures have you put in place? So
we were in a bind. I'm sure you certainly were following events on the international scene. The week when South Africa announced this variant, Omicron, was also the week, a week shortly after, we're expecting the South African president, who was doing a tour of West African states. Yeah. Could we really have said then that at that point was when we were going to be putting travel restrictions on South Africa?
No, I'm saying, for example, it is not fair. There's one point we say, it's probably not fair that the other countries that have reported Western European countries are not included in the list. So in one way, it is discriminatory that you listed 11 on the part of Britain. It's Britain that did that. If you look at some countries, they did comprehensive. In fact, Spain has just said they were not going to admit anybody from UK. So for UK's measure, we can pose a legitimate question, even at the level of High Commissioner, why only African countries? Why are you not including Belgium, Germany, Netherlands that has even identified 27? Why only us? You can pose those as a legitimate question.
So if that,
but you cannot use that to conclude. Yes. I'm saying the racist allegation. We know there's an institutional, and you cannot use that as a conclusion to say it is racist, because they can counter argue. Look, if it is racist, I have not included Ghana. If it is racist, other countries are not included, so you cannot say we're racist. If it is racist, why come that during the Beta and Delta, Nigeria was on amber and several European countries were on red? So we have to be able to put things in their boxes and then address them squarely. That's the argument I was trying to make.
Yeah, but you have already made the counter argument as well. How do we excuse the counter argument?
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It is Britain that did that. It's not exactly all the measures. I've given you an example. Spain is not allowing Britain to come in.
No, but one can understand Spain, because, I mean, Spain has seen, has held the short end in this crisis. They've seen massive deaths, perhaps even more deaths than the UK. At some point, Spain and Italy were competing in terms of the number of people that they lost owing to COVID-19. So you would imagine that Spain will be extra careful when it comes to any new variants being introduced into their own country. But where...
So, in other words, you also agree that a country has a right to be able to be proactive. That's the conclusion from your argument.
Indeed.
But we are looking at this in terms of being proactive.
Yes.
Then we say you are. Yes, we can understand you are being proactive, given what has happened, and that 5 million people lost their lives. Then we can come down to the next level. But why are you not including in this travel ban all these European countries, the Netherlands and
That's
others.
basically where we are. So that's a question. If the Netherlands already reported that they saw this particular variant, the same variant, not another one, the same Omicron that they had reported to the WHO, and they were just a week away from the WHO announcing it, as a new variant, acknowledging that it was a new variant. Why would it be that a lot more African countries were affected? Do you think that there is another reason why Nigeria was included, even though it was not in Nigeria that this?
They said the one that was identified, according to them, and that's what we should have interrogate. The one in Canada said it was linked to 2 Nigerians, 2 people, and another country said 2 people who have been in Nigeria. And that was why the health minister, British health minister, said Nigeria is only next to South Africa. This is something we can question. As I say, I'm not defending it. We cannot defend the idea that it's only African countries, because European countries have also mentioned the thing. But whether they have a right to be proactive in protecting their I would like to see Nigeria, for example, announce a travel ban. Morocco announced a travel ban. Why are we not announcing it? Angola did the same. Rwanda did the same.
Well, I mean, there'll be arguments for and against that, because, I mean, the WHO is not exactly in support of travel restrictions. But let me come to you, Mr. Fasua, because some people will say, I mean, they would certainly support Prof's point that we haven't done our own housekeeping. And there have been questions as to our surveillance system, because there'll be questions as to why it is that neighboring Ghana, for instance, is not on that list, and why it is that Nigeria is featuring very prominently, has now moved from amber to red, even though the virus did not originate from Nigeria.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, of course, we know our lapses. I was in Ghana about a month ago, and if you went into the Kotoka airport today, you probably will think you're flying into Dubai. Not only in terms of the ambience, which is there, and the well-organized whatever, but everybody that goes into Ghana gets tested for COVID, and you get your result before you leave the airport. And it's even Dubai airport, where I've been a couple of times recently. You have to, when you get to your hotel, you may get your result like 3 hours later, and so on. But in Ghana, you will get the result before you leave, and they're able to do that. People pay. So you come here and all they do is beg in the airport. All they do is beg. When I traveled to Lagos, I came and wrote an article about this. I've been tagging President Oshibajo, tagging Adisirika, the nonsense that's going on in our airport. So invariably, we know all that issue. However, look, we cannot
dismiss that issue.
No, we're not dismissing it. Yes. We're not dismissing it. That could perhaps qualify Nigeria beyond Ghana for any of such a thing. But what about South Africa? Equally well organized, equally well funded, great laboratories and so on. But the illogicality of what has happened is what? Illogicality number one, the fact that, despite the fact that Netherlands and others have reported, the UK says, oh, we are our brothers, you can come. But these other guys, they look a bit smelly. And we need to stand up for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Number one, illogicality. Number two, the fact that, look, as we're speaking right now, how many people have died in Nigeria of COVID? How much has it affected the whole of Africa? It's a lot less. And so in statistics, you extrapolate and say, okay, even if it's worse than we are reporting, but how bad can it be?
So should we say
the illogicalities are so many.
Is it the countries then that are showing apartheid, or is this how COVID too? Maybe COVID too.
No, you see, COVID actually, that's the first thing.
It has attacked the countries.
Yes, no. You see, the point is this. COVID actually gave a blank check to governments to do and undo, all right? There's been corruption, massive embezzlement, not only in Nigeria. You saw the minister of state for economic planning in Port Harcourt a couple of days back, and inspecting this teaching hospital who they had given 950 million, and there wasn't anything on ground. So not only in Nigeria, but everywhere else in the world, it's giving them a blank check to do and undo. And so the knee-jerk reaction is what people are talking about now. You have to have a basis in logic for the decision you're taking. We can't afford to close our economy because we understand how our people need to come out of all of that COVID lockdown, all of that economic shutdown and all of that, and survive.
I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts. Let's quickly take this to Lagos now. They have questions for you. Gentlemen.
So, I mean, just listen to gentlemen in Abuja, a lot of questions. And it's funny that these things overlap. But let me just start from Mr. Fasua. I'll go to Prof in a moment. And this is for a lot of people who are trying to perhaps understand the context of all of this, how big or otherwise this is. You said earlier that Nigeria's economy is largely informal. And for a lot of people, when they hear that, I mean, there's travel restriction to foreign countries, I mean, people in the informal sector, that is, they quite perhaps cannot understand because maybe their business does not involve them having to travel or transact business as much because, as you said, is largely informal. So just how huge a blow is this travel restriction dealing to the economy? So maybe we can understand at least another box, as Prof put it. Let's try to put this in different boxes. So for the economy, how big a blow is this dealing?
So again, the crude oil is our mainstay, all right? Though it has become a liability to Nigeria, plus or minus, head or tail, we seem to be losing the crude oil game. However, the recovery, if we were, and anyhow, all of us also have things to contribute. Even you guys that are press people, media people, you're doing a lot. We have got to that point in Nigeria where we can't depend on political leadership anymore. Everybody seems to be leading themselves, and all of us are leading Nigeria. That's the way I look at it. So now imagine that crude oil price would have attained 100 or 120. And the government would have been under pressure from the media, from people like us who are not in government. And listen, that you have to show us how this is impacting on Nigerian economy, and it will. In the Yaradua days when crude oil got to 140, Nigeria felt it. That was when our reserves went up to $62 billion. And that's the highest we've ever obtained. As we see now that Nigeria's reserves have been accreting, we got about $42 billion and so on. It's gone down a little bit now, So that would have helped us. Now, the whole idea of shutting down this mass hysteria, which is also part of it. The problem some of us have with COVID is that it's been driven by fear. And you don't achieve anything by driving anything by fear. Drive it by logic and let people take logical decisions. That's one. On the informality of the economy, which is also very, very important and very critical. Remember, a lot of our people are farmers, people who go to the market, people who survive by the day and all of that. Okay, so fine. We locked these people down, even in their poverty, for almost the whole of 2020, which was a year that people had planned that, look, this was my year of this, my year of that. So 2020 was my turnaround and all of that. It happened to be the total opposite of what people were planning. And now they're trying to come out. People had postponed their weddings, their celebrations, everything they wanted to do. That's what we are. That's who we are. People were going to come from abroad and bring in an inflow of resources, of foreign currencies into this country. This is December. And then this begins to happen. A lot of our people, look, there's that filial, as Marcus said, that filial relationship that we have with Britain. They need to respect that. And we're the biggest country in Africa. We are. And a lot of our people are there adding value to the British economy. All right, and this is the time. So they needed to have checked that. What could they have done? What could they have done? They could have, liaised more with the South African authorities. Say, what exactly was it you saw? No, they're saying that this is mild. Oh, it seems like it doesn't matter whether it's mild or not. In fact, this Omicron has now been positioned, and people are watching that it's the kind of the virus that actually puts an end to everything because it is mild. It has several indications showing that people, in fact, it's the indication of that herd immunity that the world has attained. I've read so many articles about that in the last few days, and that must be. So how come they now decided not to be scientific? I mean, you just wake up and you say what you want to do is shut down some people from coming to your economy. It's racist. It's discriminatory.
Mr. Fasua,
discriminatory is uncalled for.
Right. I understand that COVID-19 has turned a lot of us into scientists. I mean, visiting Lancet, Nature, just trying to check some of the updates. But, regarding this variant, it's still too early as a scientist. Perhaps I should say the real scientists have said. But still a lot of issues to unpack. And I'd like you gentlemen to please stay with us. We'll go on a quick break and we'll come back in a moment. Well, welcome back. So quite a lot of things at play here. There's diplomacy, public opinion, there's politics, but at the root of it all, perhaps, is science. And we're joined on the program just to, extend this conversation and get the science or the scientific angle to this by Dr. Mosiwe Maduka, who is a consultant public health physician, also the National Publicity Secretary, Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, and immediate past head, Department of Community Medicine, University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital. She joins us via Zoom. You saw her briefly from Port Harcourt. Dr. Maduka, good to have you on the program. So, there's been a lot of talk about the economic angle, the diplomatic angle, foreign relations, and the rest. But we'd like to talk about the science of it all. And let me just ask you, in terms of reducing transmission, just what does science say about travel restrictions and how it affects transmission? Does it drive it down? Does it increase it? Or does not have any effect at all? What's the science behind all of this? Okay. So we'll try to sort the technology behind all of this first before we get the science behind this. So we'll try to reconnect with Dr. Maduka. But let me take this back to our Abuja studio and ask Prof. We've seen different countries with different responses. The U.S., for example, for other foreigners says you can come in, but you need to get tested. Okay, you need to get tested. We need to be sure that you don't have it, and then go through the normal process. In fact, the UK will listen to the Secretary of Health, the Minister of Health, in the case saying that UK citizens or residents can come in. They'll get tested and they'll go through the normal procedure, which is what we've had in place all the while. So apparently, people will tell you there's an alternative to this, okay? There's a way you can do this without necessarily saying stay away. Are you saying that the citizens or residents might not test positive for it? Yes, they might, but there's a procedure, a process in place. So is that too much to ask for, to say, how about we just maintain what we have been doing, which, by the way, has proven to be effective?
I agree with you. I actually myself was quarantined when I was there in June for 10 days. People can raise questions, but I like the way you framed it, that this is something that has been existing. What's the need now to say only residents and citizens can come in? We can take up that and raise that conversation, whether it's going to make any difference. As you also rightly pointed out, different countries choose different paths. Morocco, as I said, banned all incoming flights from anyone. And some closed borders. Rwanda too is banning flights. So, as you said, the science behind all this, now, the real science, because we all becoming emergent scientists, is still very, very in a state of flux. People still do not seem to understand it. And I don't think it is helped by the fact that they said that they will need 2 weeks to understand it. I think that's the basis of all these hasty measures. I personally, but then I'm not a scientist, I don't see what difference it will make to just say people should not come in at all when the other measure had been effective. Having said it's been effective, there was also a noticeable rise in incidence of COVID-19. Maybe it was what goaded them to take that decision. I don't understand. I don't know the rationale, just like I cannot explain. But I'm only concerned about our response and the lack of response of Nigeria. As we condemn this apparently discriminatory policy, you discriminate not just between blacks and Africans and non-Africans, but those who are citizens and those who are residents, contra those who are not. But the question that, what's your own response? Is it wrong for any country to try to take proactive measures? No.
So, Prof, in terms of response,
what they are choosing...
pardon me. So in terms of response, let me just latch onto that quickly. in terms of response, because, I mean, you've said that what is our response now? So let me just ask you, because as it stands now, the UK has recorded over 200 cases of the new variant. Nigeria just has 3. So in terms of response, if Nigeria were to respond in kind, what will that response be, seeing that the UK has, what, hundreds of cases compared to 3, which Nigeria has?
How many people have been tested in Nigeria? So we have also to be very careful about statistics. That's probably one of the things they will take into consideration. How many people are tested? On a random, if you come in from our airport and get into the streets, what happens? I can tell you, if you go to what they get this trace and locate, or whatever they call it, if you come and you're quarantined, people are calling you all the time. People even want to know. They discover that sometimes you leave your telephone in your place of quarantine and step out. They devised other ways of checking if you're keeping to your quarantine. What is our own measure? Even at the height of COVID-19, if you get into the country, you just fill a form and you disappear. How many people trace you? So the fact that we have reported 3 does not necessarily mean we have 3. But I'm not using it to justify. I'm not using it to justify discriminatory measures, but I'm only saying, as I kept saying, that we put these things in boxes. We should have our own proactive measure instead of just being reactive. We should have a measure that assures the public, Nigerian public, that if this thing turns out to be dangerous, because nobody knows, we have your back. We are protecting you. It's not just to say because we are 3, nothing will happen. What if it turns out to be dangerous?
So
that's why the race scientist.
You didn't quite answer the question, Prof. So I'm saying that what should our response be in the light of, I mean, I gave you
our
the figures,
response is, that's what I'm saying, is leadership failure. We can decide to impose retaliatory, I won't use the word retaliatory, but it will not be out of place to say, look, if you come in, stay in identified hotels so that we monitor you for this period, 2 weeks. And just like they said, you pay for it. There must be something in place so that we can talk about negotiating.
So, but does that go with the principle of reciprocity? Does that go with the principle of reciprocity, Prof? Because, I mean,
no, this is not, which you know well.
Please go on.
I wouldn't use the word reciprocity in this context. Reciprocity maybe is quite a benign word. If you want to talk of revenge, that's a different thing. Reciprocity maybe in international relations. If you want to treat, if you decide that the embassy in one country is like the extension of that country, then the reciprocity there is that it is expected that they would give the same measure of treatment to your country. But we are thinking of where we feel that we are unfairly picked upon. So what I think we should have done is for the country also to have some measures and say, look, we are banning travels. Incoming flights are banned. If you are coming, or if we don't want to impose blanket ban as Morocco did and as Rwanda did, we can then say, identify a number of hotels. For this 2-week period, anybody coming in, isolate here so that we can monitor you. Because right now there's no effective monitoring for those who come in. Isolate in this, pay for the cost of the testing so that we'll be able to trace and locate and make sure you stay the 10 days quarantine. That could be a measure, but we don't have any.
Sure that those who have been working seriously behind the scenes will not agree with you that there hasn't been effective monitoring or surveillance, because that question has been put to them quite a number of times. Whether or not it's effective as we want it to be, I guess that's the question. Well, let's speak to the science of this conversation, having spoken the economics and the politics of it. Dr. Maduka, has finally joined us only via phone call right now. Well, quickly, before I get to my colleague's question, which he asked you earlier, what does the data say about the Omicron variant? What do we know about Omicron so far? Oh dear, I thought we had her on phone or something, but I'm pretty sure we'll get back to that very quickly, very soon. Well, Mr. Fasua, Back to the economics of this matter. The OPS, economists, everyone is raising the alarm over investment disruptions all over the place. The question that came to my mind earlier is, global economy is borderless. There are no borders anymore. But now, travel restrictions are in place. How significant is travel restrictions in a world where the global economy is borderless? Just as you said earlier, where literally the globe is literally struggling to get back on its feet, and now this has come again. It will seem there is more political or more economic than it is scientific. In terms of whether or not it's borderless, how significant is this, especially the reactions that the world is taking on this matter?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ayo. You know, I mean, it has serious global implication. I want to say that, you know, the world is finding out that some of the assumptions that were made and, you know, the thing about what they call the new normal, is a bit premature. In September 2019, Boris Johnson was on the floor of the United Nations, and he gave an 18 minutes or 19 minute speech, you know, where he talked about that some changes will be made to the world and the way we operate, and a lot more responsibility will be given to artificial intelligence and so on, and computers will determine the futures of people, who gets a house, who gets a credit, and all of that. And he advised then that if we were wise, that's the rest of us, we should speak up now so that some of the values of the traditional system will make it into the new normal system. That was September 2019, but by December 2019, the COVID hit, and the whole of 2020 became a COVID year for most countries. Okay, so now we're seeing that, look, perhaps some of those assumptions are premature. Perhaps the world is not ready for everything to be run remotely. Perhaps you know, the world of working from home being and you know, computers taking over. Perhaps we have to be careful about that. Perhaps the world is not even ready for green energy to run industries. That was in Zambia in 2016 at the African Development Bank meeting, and Akinwumi Adesina had a very bitter argument with an American woman who had come to say that, look, Africa should forget about the coal, forget about all of this dirty energy, and move into green energy. And Adesina said no, that, you know, he believes that if the United States and China and most of Europe is using their coal, African countries should also continue to use their coal.
Well,
right?
Well, Mr. Fasua,
so when they started giving him problems,
my apologies. There are so many questions to ask, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, what should Africa's economic response be now, especially given that earlier in the year, even in the previous year or the past few years, many countries have been coming to Africa, and now this is happening. But I'll take you up on that one shortly. We have Dr. Maduka on phone now to have this conversation with her. Thank you so much again for joining us, Dr. Maduka. Before I go to my colleague's question earlier, the question that I want to ask you is, what is science saying about the Omicron variant right now? What's the recent information? What's the data saying about Omicron, in spite of the world's reaction to it?
Yeah, so while we don't know everything that there is to know about Omicron, there are a couple of things that have been emerging in the past few days. Since when it was first identified in Botswana, and then of course the sequencing was finalized in South Africa, what we are seeing, initially there were fears and concerns that it may be as virulent as the Delta variant. It may cause a very serious ill health. The ability for it to be transmitted could be quite high, and that's why it's a variant of concern. But what we're seeing over the past few days, hours in fact, is that we're getting reports that the cases are actually mild, and it hasn't increased the death rate appreciably in South Africa, where it has been identified. And so experts are saying this isn't really as much a source of concern with regards to deaths as we initially were worried that it could be. There is always room for cautious optimism with regards to the Omicron, but that doesn't mean that it is something that we should ignore or we shouldn't be concerned about. And hence, I believe that is why different countries are reacting in different ways to see if they could protect their citizens. So that's what we do so far.
Right, so Dr. Maduka, we've been here before, sort of. I mean, we're still dealing with the Delta variant, which is responsible for 99% of the cases we're seeing globally. In fact, in Europe, the spike we're seeing is as a result of the Delta variant. So we've dealt with the Alpha variant, the Beta variant, Delta variant before this new one. So we have a process, we have a mechanism of dealing with this. And I mean, that's why you hear about the testing, quarantine, and the rest. But for this latest decision we're seeing, and that's what I was asking earlier, what do we know about how travel restrictions affect or otherwise transmission rates? Does it really do much?
Okay, so theoretically, if you just think about it, the whole idea behind travel restrictions is keep the virus out of our borders. So the persons are purportedly carrying the virus. You don't let them get entry into your country. They can bring it in and spread it. But it's actually very interesting to also know that by the time a variant is identified, it's likely to have already spread. It's likely to have already crossed boundaries. I mean, we are in a global age and global economy and global travel. And with all these things, the science always may often be a step behind travel, economy, and people's movement. So by the time you've identified a virus and you've done the variant and you've done the sequencing and it takes a week or 2 weeks to come out, people have moved all over the place with it. So it's actually ridiculous to say you shut down your borders and that is the way you can protect. Let's go back and put quarantine measures back in place. Let's do the testing before travel. Let's do the quarantine after you arrive in the country. Those are better ways of being able to detect if someone may have the virus. And whether it is Omicron or it is Delta or it is Alpha or it is Beta, like you have said, the process is the same. It hasn't changed, shouldn't change.
Is that in a way questioning the science behind some of the decisions that have been made by these countries, especially given the fact that a good number of those countries have very brilliant scientists?
So really, many of the decisions that are made by countries, fortunately or unfortunately, may not always be driven by science. We would wish that the scientists like us would have a voice in decision making, but it's not always so. So oftentimes countries react, or you call it a knee-jerk reaction. Immediately, what do? Block people from coming, keep your citizens safe. But the science may not support that is the best way to go, and so sometimes scientists are crying even after these things have been put in place and saying no, this isn't the right move. And I actually agree, as it is from what we know right now, that the quarantine measures are actually best suited for this situation, not restrictions.
I'll speak to one issue that was raised by one of our guests earlier, Professor in Abuja, that our surveillance system and possibly, testing and everything may not be as reliable as we want them to look. Consequently, he doesn't think that the restriction being placed on us by the UK and a number of other countries is out of place, given the weakness, if I can use that word, of our own surveillance system, of our testing and everything. Do you see any validity in that?
So we don't have a 100% foolproof system of surveillance of testing, whether it's with the rapid test kits or with the PCR. There's
or globally, Doctor.
We do have loopholes, but I can't tell you that there are teams of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people even across the country working extremely hard to put these protocols in place. And if there are challenges with the protocols and the testing and all the measures in place for surveillance, it isn't necessarily with the implementers as much as it is with people not complying. The biggest headaches we've had are people trying to evade PCR testing before they travel, people trying to forge COVID-19 vaccination certificates, people trying to pay their way through rather than going to do the right thing. And this is the pain and the headaches that we are having. And if these issues were not there, we would probably have been able to see a lot more success. But as in how are we doing? We're doing the best that we can, and I think what we're doing should be adequate if Nigerians cooperate. So it isn't really a justification for travel restrictions, because really the way it works is that you do testing on two borders. You do testing in your country and you do testing when you arrive. So there's pre-departure testing and then there's post-departure testing, whether you want to put it immediately or you want to put it a few days after you arrive. So both countries have responsibilities in this regard. So you can't really put it all on our issues and our challenges that we do actually admittedly have a few of those and say that then that means that we should be hit with travel restrictions. Remember, there are countries where this Omicron virus already exists and it's already, I don't see travel restrictions from those countries. It seems like it's too easy to just say South Africa that actually discovered this variant in the first place. Botswana shut you down while other European countries or Mediterranean countries that already, I'm very, very sure, have this circulating as community transmission. Nothing is being done about it.
Well, Doctor, we'll take a short break right now. There's still so much to unpack in all the conversation that we're having on this Omicron variant, so please stay with us. Well, thank you again for staying with us. Dr. Maduka, so the conversation is endless. Now, you talked about the fact that people are not complying. Well, you're a consultant public health physician. What are the shortfalls that we have? Is it in the area of giving information to people or persuading people, getting the right responses from them? What exactly are the challenges we're having in that regard?
Is getting people to comply.
Please go on, madam.
Okay, so the challenges that we're having is getting. I think I'm.
Well, sincere apologies about that. We're so hoping that we'll be able to get her to see her face as well. But let's continue this conversation in Abuja right now. Just before I throw to Mark, well, Prof, the conversation is that you've heard the response to some of the issues that you have raised about our own effectiveness or lack of it in doing the needful. How do you react to that?
Well, I'm not saying we don't have such measures, but many of people who have traveled out of this country, on coming back, just ask anybody how many times have efforts been made, have you been contacted to know where you are? To give you an example of what happens in the UK, if you go to a restaurant, a typical restaurant, they take some of your details. In fact, you might be somewhere. 1 week later, you get an alert on your phone that somebody who had came to that restaurant had tested positive to COVID-19. You should go and get tested. So if you arrive, when you quarantine, you have this trace and locate. I've forgotten exactly what they call it. But your phone will constantly be ringing. And you don't know when it rings. And I discussed with some people when I was in the UK the last time and found out that people try to beat that system. You leave your phone because you give the address of where you're quarantined. So you can leave your telephone number and take a walk and it will call, the phone will ring and still show that you're in the location. But then they devised a way of trying, some of them will pay a visit to wherever you said you're quarantined. So these are what I mean, the measures. Here, once you come into this country, you are supposed to quarantine. But ask, I'm sure many of you have traveled, how many people get quarantined when they return? How many people try to reach you to find out whether you are even being in quarantine? We don't have that. Or at least in my own experience, the times I've traveled, nobody has tried to contact me. And that's the experience of my colleagues and friends. So we have to take this. These are part of the lapses we have in our system. And the foreigners coming into this country, they also know there are lapses in terms of, you know, the tracing you to make sure that you're effectively being quarantined. How many?
Well, that is true. Do we then, because what we have now been told is that this is not scientific. I mean, that's from at least from our own.
But other country, they observe it. They have scientists in their own country.
Yes,
too.
you heard Dr. Maduka there, who also said that oftentimes the scientists are not listened to. You saw the conflict between even the pronouncements of Dr. Fauci and then you as President Donald Trump, and the conflict and the, you know, between science and politics.
Even within the same medical field, they will not agree. Even within the same field, political science or economics, you will not agree.
But even logically, I mean, even speaking logically, where people from, I mean, people who reside...
You can argue this, that if you're a leader, there is the pulse of the people. I was following a response to the UK measures. One of the reactions, one lady decided to gather signatures to protest. Their protest was not about banning people, but they were protesting that people who come in should be allowed to quarantine in their homes, not in hotels that is too expensive. So you wonder that you pander again to your public. Sometimes the things you say, that's what leaders do. These things you ponder to the emotions of the public.
So considering the emotions of Nigerians right now about this and the emotions of world leaders who've spoken on it, what should Nigeria's stance be if you were to advise the president or the emotions of the minister?
On emotional grounds, I can understand why analysts can come and lampoon, criticize Britain for being racist. But it will be difficult for me to understand it, why a high commissioner would do that as a diplomat.
Yeah, but you heard him. I mean, he was only re-echoing what the UN Secretary General had said. And those were pretty strong words for UN Secretary General to say.
I can tell you one thing that I feel happens in what they call third worldism. For people who have spent a lot of their time living outside the country, it's when you make certain projections like that, it becomes more difficult even for you to make an inroad.
No, what I'm saying is, right now, looking at the emotions of Nigeria's in-house, and their emotions are not baseless.
Okay.
It's based also on logic. The fact that if you're a UK citizen living in Nigeria, the restrictions don't affect you. But if you're a Nigerian and you need to travel to the UK...
The restrictions affect you if you're a resident. But the only thing is that you can come in and quarantine.
Exactly.
The others cannot come in at all.
Exactly.
So if you are criticizing the UK, why don't you criticize Morocco?
Does the virus discriminate in that regard?
No, but that's their own measure. Why are you not criticizing Morocco? Why are you not criticizing Rwanda for taking these similar measures?
But the point I was trying to make is based on how we now, because what we have magnified and we've chosen to magnify, and for obvious reasons, I do not know how many Nigerians travel to Morocco.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But I know of how many Nigerians travel to the UK, at least who had plans for the UK this Christmas.
Yeah, it is legitimate. We can air our grounds.
Based on that, what should be the stance of the Nigerian government? That's what I'm asking.
I've said that if if I were to say, I will expect the High Commissioner maybe to get in contact with the British government. The kind of grandstanding is not for diplomats. That's the point I was trying to make. Even if you say re-echoing somebody, watch the response of Britain when they said, this is what Nigeria said. He said, if Nigeria said that, that statement is unfortunate. That's the diplomatic language. So a high commissioner, a diplomat in that sense, we will expect maybe take it up, arrange a meeting. Maybe if you want the public to know what you're doing, say, I am going to have a meeting. I'm arranging to have a meeting with so and so my somebody in high up in the British government to discuss the issue. I don't need to come around and say, okay, you're racist, because then you foreclose any...
So we shouldn't expect a response from our Foreign Affairs Minister on this?
the response doesn't mean to be for the public gallery. When your foreign your high commissioner says, "I'm going to take this thing up with the British government,"
what I'm saying is our
that is
own
a more
foreign,
effective.
Nigeria's foreign affairs. We've heard from the Minister for
Yep.
Information. Should
Okay.
we expect a response from Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs?
There will be a response, but I will be very surprised if the Foreign Affairs Minister responds in the manner in which Lai Mohammed was said to have responded. I'll be surprised if he does that.
But we should expect a response.
Yeah, there will be a response.
Well, let me come to you, Dr. Fasua, on this. I do not know what your closing remarks will be. We've listened to the politics, we've listened to the science. What does the economics have to say?
Well, anyhow, but first of all, to say that, you know, in this age of the new normal, people, let's not be intimidated by any science. Anybody can get any science anywhere, you know. And on YouTube, you can train yourself. You can look. I just think, anyhow. So there's so much you can learn. Okay, so nobody can bamboozle us. And of course, as he said, we've also seen clashes even within the medical field. In this COVID time, we saw things that we never knew existed before, that even medicine does not agree with itself, and so on. Then again, I wanted to say that the dystopian future, where people will be targeted, and you know, people will be checking on them, seeing whether they took one step beyond where they should. It's as if you're having a brace, like these braces that they put on prisoners abroad. That's what we're talking about, which is a dystopian future, which is now the reality in those countries. If that's what they want, let them want it. We in Africa, we in Nigeria, we have other existential issues to deal with. We know our problems, all right? We can't afford to close down our economy for now, okay? And this is where it's at, and that's why people are actually reacting. Again, I also want people to understand.
You don't want us to close our borders?
No, if we wanted to react, okay, if we wanted to react, I'll say, listen, let's keep our borders open. Let's step up. Let's go to Ghana and learn what they're doing in the airport. It's unbelievable. I'm telling you, Ghanaians are so organized. It's unbelievable. You get that, you weep for your country. And then you come here and all they do is beg, beg, beg. Everybody beggars, you know, in our airport. You know, so I wanted to point attention to the fact that, look, what do you think the reaction of our people will be, those who have not been vaccinated, to this kind of knee-jerk reaction? So they would, does it put them off, or does it endear them to go and get vaccinated? I've been double vaccinated. I don't believe I need a booster. But we're hearing that, oh, they've also approved boosters. But I'm saying to people, please ensure you live before you die. Once you start living in fear of, hey, I mean, you know, all those hypochondriac, yeah, as good as dead. You know what I'm saying? So, but we have a life to live. We have a country to fix. We have a country in Nigeria to fix and to ensure that this country does not implode. All right, and that's what I think we should keep our minds on. What has been done? The Westerners are a lot more scientific than what they have done. This as a knee-jerk reaction, and they need to be given this feedback, which people like us who are not in government are perhaps in a better position to tell them that this is what it is. You know, a lot of plans to be, and again, I want to say, how expensive it is to quarantine people. How many people can afford to spend £5,000 just sitting in a room? And what about the mental effects on people? People are feeling a lot more suicidal these days, a lot more suicide since the time this COVID. The management of COVID from day one promoted suicide, promoted destruction of relationships. Families have collapsed and what have you. You know what I'm saying? It's a time that we need to forget about and move on. It's about flu. Remember that even according to the CDC, all right, very bad flu seasons, you have 1 million people dying in a year.
Well, we also know that this country will be approaching their own flu season, and
exactly.
Perhaps they want to.
And it comes twice a year.
But I understand that, you know, just as we wrap up now, that my colleague has just one more question for you.
Wanted to put to you earlier about you know, foreign countries, European countries that have been coming to Africa, even, you know, Asian countries as well. In the light of this travel apartheid, as at least 3 individuals representing major institutions in the world have spoken, travel apartheid. How do you see, what would you suggest that Africa should do in response going forward? We know that it's a global village, it's a global economic village and all of that, but in the light of the fact that at the end of the day, it's to your tent, O Israel. Everyone seems to bear their burdens. Given that everyone wants to come to Africa to invest, and this is the challenge that we have on our hands, and everyone is locking out Africans, How should Africa be responding?
Well, economically speaking, I believe Africa should lock them out as well. Nigeria should lock them out if possible. They can travel down here for whatever, but they know the access. The Western world knows the access they've had to African economy, especially Nigerian economy. We study their economics. We are immersed in their ideology. Everybody running our government believes in neoliberal economics and all of that stuff. So now is the time for us to first of all think for ourselves. We need to think for ourselves. We need to know our own strength. We need to begin to produce ourselves. And I will say that we need to align more with places like China. At least with China, we see some of the things that they're building on ground. We have airports to show for it. We have train stations to show for it. They're not 100%. Certainly not 100%. Give them 60%. They exploit us. They do all of that. But we see what they're building from. I ask people to show me what we have built from the interaction with the West in the last couple of decades. Nothing. You can't show anything. Since they built Murtala Mohammed Airport, I know that we should be building those things ourselves. That's the first thing. But the way we are, how many Nigerians are ready to do the hard work? Even our youth. Everybody's looking for soft work. Do we understand what it takes to build a country, to build a nation, the sheer back-breaking hard work? Are we ready? No. Our leaders are there. Everybody's enjoying, buying big cars, traveling everywhere in the world and all of that. The reason why this thing is painful for many of them is because they wanted to start jetting up and down. For me, since COVID has come, I'm ready to zero my mind and stay in Nigeria till the end of time. We have what it takes. Let's spend our holidays here, but do we have the security to do that? Let's put our government under pressure to create the security so that we spend our money in our country and all of these things. And then when it comes to time, they will beg us to come to this country. I believe it can be done. And let's align. Let's have tangibles coming from the East as well. Let's realign politically. Let's go to the Middle East and see what they can do for us in this part. That's what I think.
Well, on that note, and it's a very fine place to leave it, gentlemen, we have to thank you for your contributions to the program this morning. We've been speaking with Professor Jidofo Adibe, who is the Professor of Political Science and International Relations. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily. And Dr. Tokwe Fasua, who is an economist and feels very passionately about these matters as well. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily. Well, we also had Dr. Mosiri Maduka, who is a consultant public health physician. Sadly, we couldn't get her closing comments. Technology, would we say technology failed us here? But if she can hear us, thank you so much for coming on as well, Doctor. We'll have to leave it at this point. We'll take a break right now, and hopefully we should be able to bring you just one more perspective before we leave. Please stay with us.